Hello, it's Mr. Pinkley again, this time for part 2 of our notes, and hopefully this will work. This time we're going to talk about the juvenile justice system of our part of our Unit 12 unit. We've gone over some of this in our notes already in the last week and the week before, and this time we're going to just the review notes. First off, juvenile offenders in the Georgia court system. There's a difference between adults and juveniles. Children under the age of 17 are treated differently by the court system in Georgia due to their intellectual, emotional, and developmental differences. And that's how there is a difference between adults and juveniles. We talked about that before. It doesn't make sense to expect a juvenile to behave with the same level of maturity and make the same decisions as an adult would. So this is why there is a difference in the court system. So should a juvenile commit an act which would have been prosecuted in court as a crime, this would be designated as a delinquent act. We talked about that before, delinquent act or an unruly act. But this one, if it's something that an adult would be charged with as a crime, it's going to be a delinquent act. This might include such things as theft, assault, drug possession, things like that. Next, there are certain violent or otherwise extreme acts such as murder, armed robbery with a firearm, kidnapping, etc. They may be something that would result in the juvenile over the age 13 being tried as an adult. So just because you're under the age of 17 doesn't mean you're automatically going to be tried as a juvenile. Some crimes and some circumstances may result in you being tried as an adult. Traditionally, these crimes are referred to in Georgia as the 7 deadly sins. We mentioned them briefly in the previous part 1 slideshow notes. The list of the 7 deadly sins is a list of crimes that may warrant an upgrade in your legal status to an adult. And then supposedly it's been recently upgraded to include an 8th thing. These things are murder, rape, armed robbery, aggravated child molestation, sodomy or sexual battery, and voluntary manslaughter. And the 8th one, from what I could find, is drug trafficking. So basically what this means, if you're found guilty of committing one of these 7 deadly sins, then there's different minimum punishments. You could be actually put in jail. An individual would be put in jail for like a minimum of 10 years for committing some of these crimes. There are different minimums. They don't necessarily get imposed for everyone, but that's kind of the way that works, and that's what the 7 deadly sins for juveniles means. Next, juvenile offenders in the Georgia court system. Should a juvenile commit an act which have not been prosecuted as a criminal offense, had they been an adult, the court would designate this as unruly behavior or as a status offense. And like I've said before, that means that the status of the offender is a juvenile. So that means your status is not an adult, your status is a juvenile. Examples of this would include, but it's not limited to, possession of alcohol or tobacco, truancy, which means skipping school, being out late past curfew. There's several other things. Actually, there's probably a whole list of them. Some of them you may already know. I'm trying to think what would be something that I would not be going to court for that you guys would be. That's something to think about. Next, juvenile offenders, they have the rights throughout the intake. That means you're being apprehended by the police to an investigation and litigation of the process that adult offenders don't enjoy. One thing that juveniles are permitted is to have their parent or guardian present through the whole legal process. For the privacy of a juvenile, the picture and name are typically not released to the public as they would be for the case of an adult offender. I know you can go to the Houston County Courthouse or the Houston County Sheriff's Department or something like that, their website. And when an individual has been arrested for a crime and been booked into the system, you can actually see their picture. I've known individuals whose pictures were on there. Luckily, mine has never been there. For the safety of juveniles also, once they've been detained or held in custody, it's not permitted and it's not allowed, which is the same thing, for a juvenile to be held in the same custody or the same cell or the same area as an adult. And this makes sense. It wouldn't make sense for a 14-year-old who had been caught out partying and drinking with their friends when they weren't supposed to get caught by the police, taken to the police station, and be put in the big old cell with a bunch of mean, burly 30-year-old men that hadn't, and women that had no respect for the safety of a juvenile. So that would be kind of why that's not permitted. And finally, there is a juvenile system step of processes. This is a big thing to remember because this is largely what your project next week is going to be comprised of. So this steps kind of go as follows. Step one, rather than being arrested, a juvenile offender is taken into custody. They're not booked the same way. It's called taken into custody. So if there's sufficient evidence that does not exist to take them into custody and keep them there, they'll be released to the custody of their parents. However, if sufficient evidence does exist, the juvenile will be remanded or detained at a youth detention facility or youth detention center or an adult facility, depending on the severity of the crimes, going back to those seven deadly sins and other more serious felonies. Next, detained juveniles must have a hearing within 72 hours. For first-time offenders, a juvenile may be permitted informal adjustment, provided that they plead guilty to the charge and they're monitored by the court for 90 days. For repeat offenders, though, an adjudicatory hearing must take place where the judge will hear evidence of juvenile against the juvenile offender and but juvenile offenders are not, their case is not held in front of a jury. This is, again, a thing to help protect privacy. The informal adjustment means that the judge can choose to adjust the sentence or the case or whatever you're being charged with, I guess would be the best way to say that. Step 4, the judge will hear from witnesses in the juvenile offender's case and determine sentencing. And this is called disposition hearing. Sentencing may range from counseling and community service and fines or more or less, depending on the charges. And just like adults, juveniles can appeal their court if their case, their conviction. But there has to be enough evidence to prove their innocence or that there was a mistrial or illegally obtained evidence and things like that. Pretty much just like the way an adult can get an appeal that we talked about before. So that's it for this unit. That's Unit 2 notes. We're good. I hope this, again, like the first one, I hope it makes it easier on you to do your work. And I hope y'all are all doing well, and I will talk to you soon.